Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. Joining me today would be the man himself, the governor of the great state of Texas in the real estate department, Mr. Michael Becker, but he is on another due diligence assignment. So joining me is the professor, Mr. James Eng. James, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Paul.
How was your Thanksgiving, James?
It was good. A little bit cold, but stayed in Texas. So went down to Austin, and my brother got married. So
hey, good for him. Good for him. Good for the family. I'm glad that everybody was able to get together. But it was cold. I was up in Chicago, and it maybe was a little colder in Chicago. But it is what it is when it comes around to this time of the year. So I really want to talk a little bit today about what's going on in real estate, and especially what's going on in really one department, and it's really the servicing of a loan department. And so we're going to talk a little bit about servicing of a loan, because when you originate a transaction, you may be only with the originator for the first 60 days of the deal. And if it's a 10-year loan, you're going to be with the servicer, the person that actually monitors and you talk with for 9 years and say 360 days or 300 days or so. So you're really building a relationship with that servicer who kind of controls and owns the relationship that you have specifically with Fannie Mae or with Freddie Mac. And so I want to talk a little bit about servicing, because a servicer can be your best friend, or it could be a problem for you for future transactions. So we're going to talk today really with two folks that we're familiar with. They both work for a DUS lender, and I'm not, what I don't want to do is I want to have people be honest with this. So we're not going to really disclose who the DUS lender is. We're not going to disclose who the servicer manager is, but we're just going to say the DUS lender has lots of experience, knows about servicing. And so we're going to talk to the manager of the servicing department, and then also too with one of the guys on his team too. So I'm going to call the manager Mr. X, and I'm going to call his associate Mr. Y. So Mr. X, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
And Mr. Y, how are you?
Fantastic. No complaints. Excited to talk about asset management.
All right, let's talk a little bit about asset management. And we could talk about Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or we could talk about with other different lenders out there, whether it's bank lending or it's bridge lending, non-recourse debt fund bridge lending. But I want to talk a little bit about Fannie Mae. And what I think is important is really to understand what a DUS lender. Let's start at the beginning, what a DUS lender is. And James, I'm going to throw this over to you to answer this question. What is a DUS lender? And tell me a little bit about the relationship that they have. How many DUS lenders are there? What's the relationship with Fannie Mae?
Yeah, I mean, Fannie Mae pretty much gives the license to about 20 DUS lenders out there. And these people are really in charge of originating the loan and then servicing the loan. And so they range in size from, people doing a couple billion to 20 billion. And so Fannie Mae has, let's say, 75 billion a year to put out. Freddie Mac has about 75 billion as well to originate per year. And then the servicing books at all these places are substantially larger. So the majority of the loans that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac do are about 10 years. And, on the Fannie Mae side, they really stuck on the fixed rate side. So majority of the book on the Fannie side is fixed rate. I would say Freddie Mac has a little bit more of a floating rate book than Fannie right now. So, when the market's going well, most people are holding these deals for maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years, 3 years. But when the market's a little bit softer, like it is right now, some of these loans, these 10-year loans, people might hold it for 7, 8, 9 years, right? So when you're an owner and you come in, you have sort of an initial CapEx budget, let's say it's 5,000 a door, that works, for the initial rehab. And that might carry you for 2 or 3 years. But then a lot of these properties, whether it's 70s, 80s, 90s properties, they're going to need a little bit more CapEx. And so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are non-recourse lenders. So what that means is the collateral is the only thing that they have really to go after if there's any issues. And so they're going to get on these properties and inspect them, whether it's annually or every 6 months. And so that's what we're going to really talk about, is because when money is just coming out of the air, whether it's from the Fed, whether it's from new buyers, this business is very easy. But when there isn't as much money or your interest payments go up, then some of these properties don't receive as much attention as they should. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
So, Mr. Y, before we talk to Mr. X, who runs the asset management, anything more to add to what James has said?
No, I think he hit it right on the head. I think all the DUS lenders, they obviously, James mentioned, originate all the mortgages on behalf of Fannie, and they're given, basically the ability to originate, underwrite, to manage the underwriting process, but as well as service the loan. So they give you, the kind of the power of the pen. Where on the Freddie Mac side, Freddie has a little bit more of the say of the transaction, but they still service the deals as well. But yeah, I thought James was right on.
But if on the Fannie Mae side, if that loan goes bad, you have a loss share agreement, which I think is important for people to know, because if you're a bank, not just Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, if you're a bank and you're a recourse lender, which means that the bank has not only the asset, being the property itself, as collateral, but also has your personal balance sheet as collateral, or in case there's ever a problem, they can go after. But you guys don't have that. And so I think what's important for people to know is that if that loan goes bad, is that you have to share in the loss with Fannie Mae. So it's important for you guys to kind of make the right decision up front, but also too is that after that loan's made, to make sure that that property performs just like the original business plan talked about and why you made the loan. Anything more to add to that, Mr. Watt?
Yeah, you're correct. There is a loss sharing agreement, and so that's why on the Fannie side you are given more decision making ability, because we're at a risk position along with Fannie. We're on the Freddie Mac side and the HUD side, which are the other government sponsored entities. The lender does not take the risk, and so because of that, the HUD and Freddie take a lot more of the decision making from a servicing and underwriting and originating standpoint. So yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I think that's why, a lot of borrowers enjoy working with Fannie, is because they do allow the lender a lot of flexibility in terms of making decisions versus being more rigid on the Freddie Mac and HUD side.
All right, let's jump into it. And then James, I want you to ask some questions too of Mr. X. Again, Mr. X is an agency asset management person, so he kind of runs the department to set the table correctly. So let's just talk just basics. Loan servicing. Mr. X, what do you do? What's your job?
So we process all the payments. Handle all the capex on the front end, administer those payments as well. Ongoing financial monitoring, and then surveillance of the property. So those inspections that James alluded to.
So if everything's going well, what does that look like? Is it monthly reporting? What is the borrower? Okay, let's give an example of the good borrower. What are you receiving from that borrower, either monthly or quarterly? And then what are you seeing on the property?
Yeah, so good borrower is sending in their quarterly financial statements timely, sending in reserve requests with all the required documentation. If there's something that's going on at the property, whether that's a management change or an insurance loss or something, they're in communication with us and letting us know right away.
Okay. And then you obviously don't have to name names or name properties, but maybe give us some cases, maybe in the last, 12, 24 months, where you guys ran into an issue that the borrower didn't do what they were supposed to do.
The most common one for us is insurance losses, actually. We'll go for one of those inspections annually and find out at that time that 9 months ago, there was a fire at the property. In that situation, we should have been notified right away. We start working with the insurance company. We're involved with handling the payments and stuff like that. So it puts us in a rough position when we don't know about it right away. Another one would be management changes that kind of comes up on those inspections, same time where we weren't notified. We're supposed to be reviewing those before they happen. We show up for our inspection and it's a different management company. There's documentation involved with that, as well as, just being another layer of security to make sure that you've got someone in place that is going to do a good job.
All right.
Same thing with financials. We've definitely got some borrowers where it takes a little poking and prodding to get that. You should have that anyway. So, it's better if we just get it right away from you.
Okay. And then I know we touched on this. So once a year, you guys go out, inspect the property, just sort of on an annual basis, if there's no major items at the property level. Talk about that inspection and sort of what you guys are looking for and what you've noticed on the good side and bad side.
Yeah. Who rates the properties? When do they do it? And what are they looking for?
Yeah. So there's two components to it. We sit with the, a property manager or the owner, and we'll do kind of an operations questionnaire. How's your occupancy? How's leasing activity? How's that trending? And then in addition to that, we're looking at the physical condition of the property. We're making sure that if there were repairs needed on the last inspection, those were taken care of. General condition of the property, ideally everything's taken care of. And if we see one or two little things, the property manager can kind of explain, oh yeah, we've got bids for that. We'll have that taken care of next week. But what we're really looking for is the property condition slipping? It should be maintained, as you both mentioned. That is our collateral, so we care very much about the condition. And some of the common things that we're seeing, especially coming out of COVID, where there were times where cash was tight, and anything that wasn't an emergency repair wasn't addressed. Parking lots are failing. Railings are in rough shape. During COVID, it wasn't a great time to replace your roofs because, you wanted to hold any excess cash that you might have had. So a couple of years of that is kind of catching up to us now, and we're starting to see more and more property condition issues, whether that is just solely a result of COVID or just, kind of aging buildings, but we're seeing more and more of it.
So your inspections are sort of announced, right? So you give the borrower a heads up that it's coming, and then, but you guys are the servicer, but then the ultimate sort of behind you guys is Fannie Mae, right? And so Fannie Mae, they have an office here in DFW. And what do they like to do?
So, let me unpack that a little bit. So ours are planned. They're announced. We give you a heads up. In a perfect world, when you get that announcement, we assume that you're taking care of the property anyway. But if you get that announcement, maybe take a little sweep of the property, do an audit of things that could be completed. So we either limit the amount of deferred maintenance or, have it explained right away. That's very helpful and, kind of a best practice. Fannie Mae has been doing some more drive-bys. If historically a property has been borderline, kind of struggling, they have people that are going out and just taking a look. And, if you got shingles all over the place or your parking lot's in rough shape or, just your property is generally run down, with those drive-by inspections, they're then notifying us, here's what we saw. This may warrant additional inspection, potentially getting escalated to having a PCA done.
Let's talk a little bit more about that, and let's go back to doing the announced inspections on an annual basis and physically going out to the property and eyeballing what kind of condition that's in. I mean, I would think a lot of people would keep their properties repaired, but when you originate a loan, you have a property condition assessment report. That's really an engineer going out to the property and taking a look and making sure that they recognize on behalf of the lender things that have to be repaired. So if the PCA says you have to fix the stairs within 90 to 120 days, you better have fixed those stairs when they come out to the property. So you're going to find yourself with a problem that you have incomplete repairs per the original PCA. The other part is if you have significant deferred maintenance from the origination of the loan. So if they come out and they take a look, well, this property looked good on the PCA when we saw it, but you're not putting any money back into the property in the quality of the asset. Fannie Mae's collateral goes farther south and farther south. And that's a problem that with deferred maintenance that just continues to build and you're not putting any capital back into the property. And so if the dust lender comes out and sees that and they notify you that that's got to be repaired and you don't do it after you've been notified and that work is not completed by the scope of the defined deferred maintenance, you're going to have a problem because, again, like we said, it's the cash flow of the property, but it's really the collateral. And you could say, and this is what the argument I've heard before, well, but we're making money and we're paying a distribution out to everybody. Fannie Mae does not care how much money you're making on this deal. What they're concerned about are all those taxpayers in your 150 unit building and how they're doing it in the condition that they're living in. So don't think that you can say, well, we're paying a distribution to our LPs X amount and Fannie Mae is going to say, oh, that's great. Good job. They don't really care and don't bring that up in any conversations with anybody on that. So any comments from Mr. Y at all?
No, what I would say is just to kind of allude to what you just said. I mean, it's just always a bad look when you report your financials and it shows a strong debt service coverage, but then they go out to the property and then you're not taking care of the asset. And so just making sure that, you're taking care of just the little tic-tac items that seem to be kind of what Mr. Y was saying earlier, Mr. X was saying earlier. If you don't take care of those life safety items for a couple of years, it's starting to pick up and we're starting to see a lot of issues. So just making sure you're staying on top of those repairs because they do add up.
James, what happens if you don't take care of those items?
Yeah, I mean, when the dust lender goes out there and they look and inspect the property, they really give it a rating anywhere from, let's say, 1 to 5, and 1 being sort of top notch, A plus, and then 5 being F. So if you want to be in sort of that, 1, 2, even 3 number on your rating, but you don't want to slip into the 4s and 5s. And then, and so every time they go out there, they're going to give a rating to the property. And if you slip into the 4s or 5s, that's really where Fannie Mae is going to sort of take the deal over a little bit. And they might send a additional inspector, someone like a more difficult, let's say, PCA inspector out to the property. And so when they do that, that's going to put a lot of pressure on you as a borrower. So we've gotten these love letters. Our borrowers have gotten these love letters.
And these are not love letters by any means.
So, the PCA inspector might go out there and they're going to spend a couple hours or 4 hours or 5 hours on your property and really dig through everything and take pictures of everything and essentially give you a new list of immediate repairs. And we've seen, these items add up to $500,000, $1 million. And you essentially have 30 days to put that money up. And so a lot of people, whether it's a $20 or $30 million property, most borrowers have maybe $100,000, $200,000 at the property level. And so general partners are having to come up with this money to mitigate that immediate repair or put up that money for the immediate repair. So that's what we've seen in the last 6 to 9 months is more of these love letters coming in.
Yeah. The one thing I will add to that, James, is that if Fannie Mae drives the property unannounced, they just happen to be in your area and they're driving a little Ford Focus and they go by the property with a bunch of employees that work for Fannie Mae and they go, oh my God, look at the condition of that. Let's call for that PCA report. And they can do that because that's in the contract to do. Who pays for all those reports? Well, you, the borrower, are going to pay for that report just because Fannie Mae is concerned about it. Again, this is all about, mitigating the risk of these transactions. And the borrower may come and go, but the asset stays forever. And so they want to make sure that asset is taken care of and improved, and it doesn't continue to decline on that one. So let's go back to Mr. X. Anything to add to some of these comments?
I would clarify. So when, someone from a servicer comes out and they do their annual inspection, funds aren't required to be posted at that time. So that's kind of like, that's very much preferred, I would imagine, on the borrower side. If you hear from us and we give you a list of things like, here's what we saw, here's what it's going to take to get the property back where it needs to be, responding timely to that list is way better than letting it slide. And then, we, at a certain point, if a PCA has to be engaged, or if Fannie or Freddie go out and look at it themselves and engage a PCA, it's just better to take care of it right away rather than waiting for it to, get worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of first X on somebody's record. If you get a low rating on a property, you have the chance to rectify it. But in the meantime, if you have a property that is rated low, let's say a 4 or a 5, and you get a love letter from Fannie Mae that says, you have to put up this money for immediate repairs, you're on another list, unfortunately. And we'll call that list the A check on the Fannie Mae side. And that list is essentially, we're not going to give you any new loans list. And so if you go into Fannie Mae and, you apply for a loan, whether it's a refi, whether it's a new loan, and then now they look at the list, look up your name, and the loans that you currently have aren't performing, or they're on the, a 4 or 5, that's not gonna bode well for you as a borrower, because now, your exit that you thought you had out of your bridge loan to Fannie and Freddie isn't there. And so, it's one thing to put up, $500,000 on an escrow for an immediate repair, but it's another thing to be declined on a loan. So I'll open it up to X or Y to add some comments on this.
Yeah, and one thing I would add quick would be, we've talked about this maybe in the past in some podcasts, but if you're maybe a KP or sponsoring with somebody else, and maybe you're not the day-to-day person, but you signed on the loan, your name kind of, if you sign on a loan, whether you're the day-to-day managing member or not, you are along the ride with that loan. So if there is an issue, your name will be tagged to that as well. So I know that's been a common issue over the last couple of years of people that we hear from folks and saying, well, yeah, I KP'd on that deal, but I'm not the day-to-day person. Well, you put your name when you sign the dotted line, and KP'd, you put your reputation on the line along with your other general partners.
Yeah, one deal could have a problem that's having a problem, could affect the rest of your ability to do future transactions. Go ahead. I cut you off, Mr. X.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add there is, it's at the Fannie level. So it's not like you're on a check at lender A. I'll just go to lender B and get a Fannie loan. It really limits what you can do with that particular agency as a whole.
So so it doesn't work. Yeah. So Fannie Mae has their list, and then Freddie Mac has their list. Is that correct? I don't think there's two. There's not one.
They're separate.
One master list.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't think they talk.
Yeah.
It's not like Santa Claus when you get on the bad boy list or the Santa Claus bad boy or girl list. It doesn't affect, but they kind of work in silos. So if you're on the Fannie Mae A checklist or the bad boy list, you're not going to be on the Freddie Mac bad boy list. So they do work in silos. So that's an important thing. But let's go back to A check again. How do you get on it? What have you seen, Mr. X, about how do you get on it, and then how do you get off of it?
Yeah. So really, it's a tool for Fannie to make sure that their risk is being properly monitored. And there's a whole myriad of reasons that can get you on there. If you're misrepresenting financials, if there's a bankruptcy, foreclosure, a monetary default, or a non-monetary default, which is kind of what we're talking about here. It's just a heightened level of scrutiny for any new business that you want to bring in. And it kind of takes away the lender's decision-making abilities. It goes straight to Fannie Mae, and they kind of run with it. So you could be my favorite borrower. If you get on the list, we kind of lose our ability to, lobby for you,
So on a normal deal, let's say a deal comes in, it sort of fits the Fannie Mae box, and you already have the right to underwrite the deal, approve the deal. You sort of have the power of the pen. But if somebody is on that list, then it's got to go up to Fannie. Is that right?
That is correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's essentially pencils down
yeah.
with your, and then a lot of times when you're the lender, we're not able to be involved at all in the process. So essentially, we tell the borrower, "Hey, you're on a check. Here's a number from Fannie Mae. Please contact them," and then we're out of the picture completely.
Yeah, you cannot be a cheerleader in the deal trying to convince Fannie Mae to get that person off a check. Now, remember, is that the DUS lender has to report to Fannie Mae, and they do it 45 days after the quarter. And so, it's a lot of things are not kind of caught up. If that you've cured a problem, they may not see it for a little bit. So the reporting is a big thing for the DUS lenders to Fannie Mae, because they ask the questions: is the borrower likely or unlikely to make the debt service payments on a monthly basis? So that's number one, yes or no. And then they ask, is that likely to meet the contractual obligations to pay this loan off by the end of the loan term? So again, everything is mitigating the risk. And if you have a history of having a problem, this asset cannot be sold, or somebody's not going to come in and change it. That's going to have an impact of risk to Fannie Mae. And they're going to ask for an action plan after they kind of spell out on the PCA of what you're going to do and the scope of the work, how long is it going to take. Talk to, there may be a disagreement between the cost and the scope, but Fannie Mae is always going to trump of what it's going to be. And the borrower is going to, if there's going to be a cost or stuff that's going to be due, it's going to be incurred by the sponsor for any fees or mitigating factors to fix the property. James, any stories that you've heard with people getting on a check, how they did it?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, yeah, some people have gotten on the list, and the last 2 years, it's really been a lot of bridge loans. And so, the bridge lenders are even more siloed than the DUS and servicers on the Fannie Freddie side. And so it really hasn't been an issue because people haven't used as much Fannie Freddie debt the last 2 years. But now, as people come in and they want to refi out of their bridge loan or refinance an existing loan, or do an assumption of a Fannie loan or Freddie loan that has a fixed rate, they're finding out they're on a check. And sometimes, you got to call the number and go through the process and sort of have all your properties sort of laid out. All right, this is what we bought it for. This is how much money we put in. These are all the immediate repairs we fixed. Some of the issues came up and where, whether the property had a fire or some of these large items, whether it's insurance. And so your property just got rated a 4 for a long time. But once you've cleared all those issues, showed the occupancy was good, showed the rents were good, showed that you were able to put Humpty Dumpty back together, then people were able to get off this list. But it does take a little bit of time. And so making sure that you're not on the list, number one, but then also making sure, whether you drive all the properties, walk all the vacants, this is what you should be doing on a weekly or monthly basis to make sure that you're not on this list.
Yeah. And if you get on the A check, there's a report that's written on the deal, and the report doesn't, the incidents may have occurred, say 2 years ago, and you're still on the list, but now you've cleared it up. Make sure you take pictures of kind of the before and after of what you've done, because pictures add a lot to the tone of these properties. And remember, Fannie Mae is looking out for the taxpayers who are the tenants in your properties and making sure. And so don't bring up to Fannie when you have these discussions again that, we sold this thing at, 160% over what we paid for it, and we made nothing but tons of money for our limited partners. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that your money has gone back into the property, and you did a great job to restoring this property to a much better condition than what you bought it for. So I think that's a key thing. James, anything more to add to that, or Mr. X or Mr. Y?
The thing that I would add is it's easier to get on the list than off it. There is a path back, but it will ultimately be more difficult to cure those issues that are identified than it would have been to just do the right thing the whole way along.
Yeah, I mean, maybe talk about some of the other, like we focused more on like the physical aspects of getting on the list, but you mentioned some of the other things that potentially could get you on that A check list. Maybe talk about some of those because I think people are less familiar with that.
Yeah. First one that comes to mind would be like an unauthorized transfer. If you just went ahead and sold your whole interest in a deal, if you were like a guarantor on the loan and you walked away from it without telling anybody, that's a problem. Trying to think of others that would be applicable. Yeah, sorry. That's the first one that comes to mind. Really anything that is an event of default as identified in the loan agreement can potentially escalate to a check. So for familiarizing yourself with the loan agreement and particularly the defaults and remedies section is very helpful for everybody.
Okay. I want to move just sort of into, the next biggest thing that is coming up in people's minds from the loan servicing side is these floating rate loans and what is needed on interest rate caps. That seems to be the most emails that I'm getting right now in terms of, so I know Fannie had a floating rate program or has a floating rate program that they started sort of probably 2021, I think. And talk about sort of what the initial caps that people bought and then what you're having them sort of escrow and how often you check those.
Yeah. So in 21 and 22, we did quite a few of those. And part of that is to buy an interest rate cap. At the time that we closed a lot of ours, it was historically low rates. So it was very cheap, great deal for everybody. But obviously the rates have done what they've done this year. And one of the side effects of that is interest rate cap pricing for a replacement cap. The costs have gone way, way up. So part of having the cap, we have a reserve that we collect on monthly. And part of the agreement is to adjust those amounts annually. So when we came up on this first round of adjustments, it was, in some situations, it was 10 times what it was before. So kind of potentially deal-breaking amounts of money. So it's kind of forced some people to take another look at those. One thing I would say with those is, when we get that big bump, that is still your money. So, you do still have some options, whether that's converting to fixed or some other type of refinance. You do have the ability to get out of that a little bit, and those funds would be returned back to you. But the monthly escrow is to make sure that there's enough money when the current cap expires to replace that cap. I don't know if that answers all your questions there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for people, let's say you originated a loan in 2020, so COVID time, you put a floating rate loan on. Your initial escrow on most deals was maybe a couple thousand a month, maybe 2,000 a month. And then, after a year, they're like, hey, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. And you've got, let's say 2 years to put in money. So it might go from 2,000 to 30,000 a month. Okay, that was good. Now you got 200,000 in there. The problem that people are running into is now you've got 11 months left before your replacement cap is up. And they're like, well, you're short $900,000 and you've got 11 months. So now it's going from 2,000 to 30,000 to now 100,000 a month. And what's crazy is this interest rate cap cost is now more than your mortgage payment, right? So your interest payment, at 5% on a $20 million loan is 100,000. Now, your interest rate cap added on another 100,000. And so a lot of properties are running into this right now just because of the cap cost. And so maybe Mr. Y can tell us what some borrowers are doing in terms of dealing with this. And Fannie, Freddie have a little bit different. So maybe let's take it from the Fannie side and then we can talk about Freddie then.
Yeah. So, I mean, the floating rate deals that were done, back in 20, the strike rates that were required at that time, because, SOFR was basically zero and the Fed was saying that, hey, we're not even thinking about raising rates for the next 3 years. So it was super cheap to buy these interest rate caps. And so those strike rates on a lot of those at the time were like 2.5% or 2%. And so now when SOFR is, 4%, probably going to 4.5 here sometime in December, it's super expensive if you have to buy a 2% cap because that was required in your loan agreement. And generally on the Fannie side, they've required 3-year interest rate caps. However, on some of their probably 2022 business, they have moved down to 2-year caps. So it just depends on when you close the loan, and you are required to buy the same replacement cap. So if it was a 3-year deal up front, it's a 3-year cap going forward, and same on a 2-year deal.
And same strike?
Yeah, same strike. So that's like obviously what we were just talking about when you're talking about the 2020 deal, when the strike could have been 2% or 2.5% for 3 years. Today, if you have to do that and SOFR is 4%, it's super, super expensive. So say that maybe cost 10 basis points at the time of the outstanding balance, now that's probably 4 or 5%.
Of the 500 basis points.
Yeah, so it's a material difference.
Yeah. So I guess going back, obviously hindsight's 2020, but everyone should have bought 5-year caps at 1% strike rates. So next time that they weren't even quoting that. That's what's crazy, is that we weren't even like quoting that, but it probably wouldn't have been that expensive, right? Because the forward curve then never hit 1%, right? For 7 years. So as much as the forward curve was wrong back then, everyone's hoping the forward curve is wrong right now. And, as we said about these escrows, it is an escrow, right? So you're putting in $100,000 a month, but the thought is hopefully by the time that you actually have to buy the cap, it is significantly less expensive. But if somebody doesn't want that uncertainty, right? So I was reading something yesterday about, this guy was like, look, there's only 3 ways the interest rates can go. They either go down, they stay flat, or they go up. And you have to protect yourself either way. And so a lot of this guy's philosophy, this lawyer's philosophy was like, look, if I can fix something now and have a reasonable prepayment penalty, then I'm limiting obviously my upside, but I'm protecting my downside. And so, 10-year treasury has retreated probably 60 basis points in the last 30 days. And so it was at 420, now it's 360, something like that. And so a lot of these deals size decently well. So you might be at 5.5. You're not at 3.5 like you would have been, but you're at 5.5. You sell your interest rate cap, and you sort of protect the downside on these deals. And so Fannie has the option of converting your floating rate deal over to a fixed rate deal, which is pretty good. And then Freddie, on the same token, they can waive. If you have a Freddie floater, you can waive the exit and just do a new loan. And so people weren't looking at that when it was a 625, 650 rate, but now it's a 550 rate. People are looking at that a lot harder.
Yeah, certainly true on that, James. I want to go back, to Fannie, Freddie, but also let's go back to the refinance out of these bridge loans. Interest rates go up. There's a cap. There's a debt yield qualifier on a lot of these deals. So you may have 3 years of interest only, but if you go, again, these were 3-year interest only, and then 2 1-year extensions, 1+1. And there was hurdles in these deals. And if you didn't hit the hurdles, you had cash management. And James, again, when you're talking about these bridge loans, what is cash management? And then does Fannie and Freddie have cash management or do they have any hurdles besides this interest rate cap?
So yeah, let's put these in a couple buckets. I mean, Fannie and Freddie fixed rate loans, those have been pretty stable. Not really any change there. Fannie and Freddie floating rate loans, the big thing has been interest rate caps. But the good thing on the Fannie Freddie floaters is that they had 10-year terms, right? So you had a 10-year loan term, so you have no maturity issue. You have more of a short-term cash flow issue on a monthly basis with these interest rate caps. The final bucket is the bridge loan. The bridge loan has a 3-year term, typically, initial term, and then you're going to have maturity at the end of that 3 years, and you're going to have to do something. But let's say you started the deal on the bridge loan with maybe, let's say, a 5% debt yield. So 5% debt yield means your NOI over your loan amount. And so most of these bridge loans were made so that you could come in, do the rehab, raise rents, improve the NOI, and then you would exit sort of by year 2, year 3 at maybe an 8 or 9% debt yield. And so the bridge lender typically put in month 18 a debt yield test, and that debt yield test would sort of be halfway between your initial debt yield and your exit debt yield. So let's say it's 6.5. So at 6.5, they're going to check in. So month 18, they check in and say, all right, let's look at your NOI, divide that by the loan amount. Are you at 6.5? And if you are not at 6.5, they have a couple of remedies. One is they're going to sweep all your cash flow and protect their collateral, the loan, and make sure that you're not distributing any excess funds. So they're sort of start sweeping some of that money to potentially pay down the loan if they need to. And then some other lenders have something in there where essentially you need to resize the loan. And resizing the loan means, all right, you need to get to a 6.5% debt yield. Your NOI is, I'm just going to make up a number, $1 million. And in order for you to get to 6.5, you've got to pay down your loan balance by $500,000. So just depending on the calculation, you're going to have to figure that out on your particular loan. And that is one of the hooks that bridge lenders have, is that they want to figure out, before I get to maturity, do I have an issue with this property? And so I think a lot of the bridge loans that were done maybe in 2020, 2021, those tests are definitely starting to come into play now. Is like, are you hitting the debt yield? And if you're not hitting the debt yield, then we're going to start sweeping all your cash.
Great explanation, because the bridge lender doesn't want to see a flat line of NOI. They kind of want to see like a hockey stick, where the NOI when you bought the property probably went down because you're rehabbing the property, and NOI is supposedly going to go down because you're displacing tenants and you're fixing stuff up. But then when you start to have all these units online and you're able to charge higher rents, your NOI is supposed to be going up and up and up. And so it has been going up. And now we're seeing a little bit of flatness on rental growth in the marketplace. So I think it's going to be a larger question, not only with interest rate caps, but also these debt yield tests of what is going to happen. And if you are a general partner, are you going to have to be resizing these loans to pay down the debt? Because again, contractually, you said that you were going to be able to get there with continued rental growth on the deal, and it may be there, but that's the question that you want to have, the topic you want to talk about with your servicer. Your servicer is going to tell you how they're seeing it. You may have your belief, but you want to build that relationship with the servicer. Just like I said, in the Fannie Mae case, if you keep that loan for 10 years, I mean, your servicer, hopefully, if they don't leave, they're going to be there for 9 years and 300 days with you. And on these bridge loans, they only want to have you with them for 3 years, and so they're trying to get you off. But again, they're protecting their collateral and their position, just like James said, to kind of prove up that whatever you told us at the beginning, what your business plan was, we want you to honor that. And if you don't, these are the repercussions of what's going on out there. Anything more, James, before we throw it back to Mr. X and Y for final comments?
No, let's go to them.
Well, the one thing I would say is, if from a servicer's perspective, we want to help, and the more communication that the borrowers can have with us, it just makes our job a lot easier to advocate on your behalf. So whether that you reach out to your day-to-day manager on our end, whether it's reporting financials, whether like Mr. X said earlier, insurance claims, management changes. The best clients that we have over communicate versus under communicate.
Mr. X?
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. The other thing I'd like to just drive home is take care of your properties. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself in the long term. It's obviously very much preferred on our end and Fannie Mae's end as well. And it's good for the tenants. So that's all I got.
Ask one more question. I tell the general partners or asset managers to walk, if they can, walk the property weekly and walk every vacant. Is there any other tip out there or besides that?
Yeah. Those would be great. That's the best practice. Our best borrowers do that. Just more generally, just be involved. I know sometimes, it's the properties aren't necessarily very close, but just being in communication with your property management company and us, having your fingertip on the pulse of what's going on at the property is very helpful, whatever means you go about to achieve that.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank Mr. X and Mr. Y, and of course, the good professor for spending some additional time. I think this is an important topic to talk about these days. that maybe overlooked. And I think I wanted to spend some more time. So I did definitely want to appreciate the time that Mr. X and Mr. Y have helped us to better understand a little bit about what Fannie's perspective is, and to kind of encourage us to, again, maintain the properties and don't find yourself on a check in the future, because it's damn difficult to try to get off. And if your exit from a bridge loan is Fannie or Freddie, then you're on a check, it's gonna be much more challenging. So again, James, thanks for spending some time with us today. We certainly do appreciate it. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.